Hi everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Big Blonde and Beautiful, the podcast. I'm your host, Karolina Howie, but you can call me Kara. If you're watching the video of this, just a heads up, obviously this is the first episode. I'm working on where to film at, so the background will probably change, the lighting. Not super happy with it right now, but it's what we're working with. Anyway, so I wanted to kind of do a short little introduction about myself and then about the podcast. So a little bit about myself. I recently graduated from the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. I graduated with a bachelor's in media and cinema studies and a minor in theater. Yes, that is correct. I am a theater kid. So this is your warning, I guess. So I am fat, obviously, and I've grown up watching some fat representation. And so when I was thinking what I wanted to do for this podcast, I was like, why not that? We need a space where we can talk freely about this subject, use the word fat without people being like, oh my goodness, fat? No, you're not fat. Yes. Yes, I am fat. And you know what? That's okay. It's not a bad thing. Fat and ugly don't mean the same thing. Fat and unhealthy don't mean the same thing. I'm not promoting obesity. I'm just a fat person who exists, and we'll be talking in other episodes to other fat people who exist. And we just want to see ourselves represented accurately and in a positive light in film, you know? So, anyway, this podcast is called Big Blonde and Beautiful, and I named it after the song in Hairspray that Motormouth Maybelle sings called Big Blonde and Beautiful. I've always loved that song, and I just thought it was fitting because it's what I am. I am big, I am blonde, and I am beautiful. So, as I said earlier, I've always been fat. I've always been, if you're watching the video, my cat might pop in and out. I'm sorry. Anyway, I've always been fat. I was teased mercilessly as a kid. Obviously, people still like to make their comments, and with me putting myself out there more, I'm gonna get more comments, but that's just the way the world works, unfortunately. So, in Hollywood, they really like to perpetuate this idea of fatness by either making a fat character a stereotype or by casting people who aren't fat, just aren't like skinny minis, as fat characters, which I'm going to touch on those movies as well. But for this first episode of this podcast, I thought that we should start with a more positive representation and a classic fat character. I mean, literally, fat's in her name. And if you guessed it, I'm talking about Fat Amy, or Fat Patricia, as she later calls herself, from Pitch Perfect. Now, if you've never seen this movie, welcome to civilization. How is that rock you've been living under? Um, Feel free to pause, go watch the movie, or if you just are like, nah, I don't want to, and you just want to listen, that's cool too. And for those of you who have seen it, let's get started. All right. So, in case you didn't know, Fat Amy is played by Rebel Wilson. Now, Rebel has recently lost a significant amount of weight, but the entertainment industry would probably still consider her to be a bigger bodied person. This is what I like to call industry fat. I've heard this term from other podcasts like Not Just Tracy Turnblad, which I highly recommend listening to. But anyway, this industry fat term, it considers people who are a size 8 or above to be fat. Now, if you are a fat person, you know that that is not accurate. Just because you have a butt and boobs or a little bit of curves It does not make you fat. It just makes you fat in Hollywood, I guess. But we aren't focusing on Rebel Wilson. I'm thinking about doing some mini episodes on fat, like, people in the public, but that's not what this is about. This is about specifically Pitch Perfect and her character, Fat Amy. I also wanted to preface this by saying, not all fat people are the same. I feel like that's pretty obvious, but unfortunately, it has to be repeated. The amount of times that I have been compared to Rebel Wilson or told that I need to act like Rebel Wilson is literally insane. Am I fat? Yes. Am I blonde? Yes. Is Rebel Wilson fat and blonde? Yeah. But that does not mean that I need to copy her or I need to be her. I am my own person. I'm just as good and as valid as she is. And don't get me wrong, I love her. I think she's so funny. I love a lot of the movies that she's been in. But that doesn't mean that I need to be a copy and paste version of her. There's already a Rebel Wilson. We don't need another one. So, anyway, rant over. Back to the topic, I promise. So Pitch Perfect. Before I rewatched this film for this episode, I was kind of thinking back about how I remembered Fat Amy as a character, and for some reason I remembered her more as like a caricature of fat people, like super over the top. I was young when this film came out. The movie came out, I believe, in 2012, which means I was 12 years old watching it. And going back and watching it as a 22-year-old, my perspective has changed. I do still think she plays into that, like, that funny friend trope, but I do feel like a lot of fat actors and actresses, you take what you can get, because a lot of the times people like to cast people who aren't fat, or they even put skinny people in fat suits, which we will talk about that later. That is a pet peeve of mine. But despite the fact that Rebel Wilson was given this, like, fat funny friend character, I think she made it into something more. Um First of all, I love that Fat Amy is unapologetically herself. Like, so in the movie, before she comes on screen, we see Chloe and Aubrey trying to recruit people. And Aubrey says something like, I'm sure that we can find bikini ready bodies that can harmonize. Like, it's not even, we want people that can sing. And if they look good, it's a, well, I don't mean look good. If they look skinny, it's a plus. No, it's, they have to be skinny. Oh, and they should be able to sing. So there's that. And then as soon as they finish talking about that, who walks on screen other than Fat Amy herself? And I love, kind of, I don't know, I have mixed opinions about her calling herself Fat Amy. On the one hand, I'm like, it seems a little like cringy. But on the other hand, I kind of love it because she takes the power back. So she introduces herself as Fat Amy, and they're like, "You call yourself Fat Amy?" And she literally says, quote, I have it written down here, "Yes, I do it so twig bitches like you don't do it behind my back." And the two quote unquote twig bitches are just like speechless. And I love it because she's taking this word, fat, that is seen as, like I said earlier, ugly or negative, and she's being like, yes, I'm fat. You see that. I see that. Let's move on. Like, I'm taking the power back. You can't make fun of me because I already said that I'm fat. You just be stating something that I already said. So I really love that. She kind of takes the punchline away from them. Um, I also love her confidence. It is unmatched. She just knows who she is, and I love that about her. Also, another thing that I love that breaks away from this like classic fat character is that she has no problem getting men. She literally rejects Boomer in the first part of the movie. I can't remember if she rejects him like multiple times or if it's just that one big time, but I know she at least does once. Um, and then later on in the film, after we see them lose, I believe it was sectionals, but then the footnotes are found out for having a high schooler. And so then they're disqualified and the Bellas get to come back. Um when they call her, she's seen surrounded by men in this pool. And when I say surrounded, I mean surrounded. Um she even says when the Bellas are fighting about like Becca and how Aubrey's too rigid, she says like I joined this group to be around a bunch of cool women and to get away from my boyfriends. So we see she has multiple boyfriends. She is desirable, which I feel is not shown enough with fat characters. They're seen as, oh, they need to change in order to find love, or they just don't ever find it, which is absolutely ridiculous. We're not even. But she is lovable, she is desired, she is sexual, and it just is so nice because I feel like as fat people, we are told by our peers, by our family, by society, by the media, that the only way that we are valuable or desirable is if we lose weight. And that just is not true. I'm going to say this a million times in this podcast. Fat does not mean ugly. Fat does not mean undesirable. It is just a way to describe your body type. It's like saying someone's skinny, except people have decided to put this negative connotation with it. It literally is just a body type. When people, and I can see how uncomfortable people get when I say I'm fat, or oh, I'm making this podcast about fat representation instead of saying like plus size or body positive representation, which to me it's all the same thing. Plus size, body positive, fat, they all intersect. So anyway, small little rant, sorry. My point was I just like seeing that she is able to find love or sex, whatever she wants, even though she's fat. Um, Plus, I just love that Fat Amy doesn't give a F because I wish that I didn't sometimes. I might act like I don't, and for the most part, I'm getting better. But she just truly doesn't. She just does what she wants. You know, if she wants to lay on the ground and pretend to be a mermaid, she's gonna do it. If she wants to rip off her shirt at the end of a performance to be like, bam, she's gonna do that too. And she did. So honestly, I love how confident they make her, how sexual they make her. I know that she's not the most sexual character, but she's got a little extra va boom in there. I love how she's unapologetically herself, and it's just very refreshing to see that even though she is the fat funny friend, she is more than that. And I appreciate that very much. Also, side note, Cynthia is also a bigger person, and I love that they don't make that her personality. I mean, they do kind of focus on the whole she's a lesbian part a little too much, but it is also a comedy movie, so they lean hard into a lot of things. Like the puking, and just a bunch of stuff. Oh, I also wanted to add, I love the fact that even the skinny girls have some weird things going on. Okay, Aubrey is a nervous projectile vomiter. It's not just a little. It's not just like, oh, she threw up in her mouth, you know. No, it's just like in your face. Like she just pukes everywhere. And Chloe has nodes, and then at the end of the movie she has like this bass voice that doesn't really match her like peppy and sort of like skinny personality and look. I just love that. And then, oh my goodness, the girl who whispers. I can't remember her name right now, which is really bad. I'm sorry if you're a huge fan of her character. She is hilarious. I'm sorry I can't remember her name. But oh my gosh, her little whispers crack me up. So, saying also that Rebel Wilson's character is just the fat funny friend, they're all ridiculous characters except for Becca. I feel like Becca's pretty obviously the most normal one, but it's just so funny. I can't. I do appreciate that they leaned into the quirks of the other girls too, and not just having Fat Amy be the only odd one or funny one. I really appreciate that. Now, before I wrap up this episode, I just want to highlight some of my favorite Fat Amy moments. One of my favorites is when Boomer's asking her out, and he's like, I think we should, like, make out a little, or whatever he says. And she goes, I sometimes had the feeling I could do crystal meth, but then I think, better not. And I die every time she says that. Like, she's equating doing crystal meth to making out with this guy. It is so funny. When she announces that her real name's Fat Patricia, she's so serious. She's like, my real name is Fat Patricia. It just cracks me up. And then when she says, I could believe it, that is everything. Her comedic timing is just so good. Oh, also, last thing I want to mention, one of my favorite things is when she gets hit by that burrito and goes, I'm gonna finish him like a cheesecake. So funny. Okay. Anyway, overall, I think that Fat Amy is a positive fat representation. While I do think she falls into some of the classic tropes that I wish we could move on from, I think that the writers and Rebel Wilson did a good job making her more than a fat person while not losing the fact that she is fat. So I really think that it's positive. Thank you all so much for listening to the first episode of Big Blonde and Beautiful, the podcast. I really hope you all enjoyed. If you did, please rate us 5 stars. I would really love for this podcast to reach more than just my friends. Not saying that I'm not happy that you all are here, because I am. Thank you so much for being so supportive. But I would really like this podcast to be able to make a change in the industry, to reach important people in Hollywood is my goal. To say, hey, we're fat, we're here, and we deserve better. So, anyway, rate us 5 stars. Please follow us on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Also, follow us on Instagram at bbb.podcast and on TikTok under the same name. And I will see you next week when we discuss one of my other favorite movies, Dumplin'. And until Wednesday, stay fat and fabulous. Bye!